So the people that have been staying up to date with my critic reviews on here, they know about my personal opinion on every single Yakuza game since they brought out Yakuza 0 and started remastering all of them up until Yakuza 6. And I also played through Judgment, Yakuza 345 Collection Remastered, and now we're on to Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon. So, the best parts of Yakuza 7. The graphics, as always. The story was still intriguing and interesting. There were some very excellent scenes. The gameplay was, for the most part, fun to play. The voice acting was good. It had good localization for in the United States, with Japan as well. And that's essentially where my praise ends with Yakuza Like a Dragon. So, all of the other ones, Yakuza 0 to Judgment, the biggest gripe I had with those games were either too meandering of a storyline and or the beat 'em up gameplay could have been refreshed. Now, when I say refresh, I mean just improved, just do better. If I were to make a Yakuza game, do you know what kind of gameplay I would put into it? The Batman Arkham games combat. I think that would mesh very well with a Yakuza Mafia game. So, what do they do with Yakuza 7's gameplay? Well, they take the beat 'em up that was a good gameplay system, just needed some improvement, and they completely erased it, and they put in a Japanese RPG gameplay. And let me tell you, they not only did that, but they also made it a grinding game. And here's the problem I have with that in a Yakuza game. A Yakuza game is the main thing, the number one thing that you're supposed to play it for is the main story. Okay? Now, I thought that Yakuza was developed very well to Judgment. They gave you a difficulty setting, and then they gave you a main story, which was between 15 to 45 hours, depending on which game you were playing. Yakuza 7 turns an average of, I'd say 16 to 20 hour main story game into a 40 to 50 hour game. And it's not because the main story is that long. It's because they turned it into one of those games where almost halfway through the game, this one character says, "Yeah, I'll take you into this building. But you're not equipped enough to show your face in there with me. So why don't you go get geared up? Go get some armor and some more swords and bats." So, okay, no big deal. Go to a shop, buy more armor to equip, more weapons. Okay, no big deal. Here's the problem. The economy system in this game is crap. Okay? The story is fine, but the story itself mixed with the JRPG gameplay elements, they just clash together so poorly. It's like they didn't even think about it. Okay, you play as a protagonist who spends 18 years in prison for a murder he didn't do, but he was willing to go to prison for. And then he gets out, obviously he's broke. So what are you tasked to do in the main story? Oh, go pick up this, go buy that, go. It doesn't make any sense. And not to mention, when you try to fight off thugs in the streets or just business people or whatever, the JRPG gameplay gets pretty ridiculous. It's turn-based, and sometimes it's pretty horrible. Okay, the gameplay would be fine. It would be solid in a completely different game and story. But putting it into a Yakuza story does not make sense. It doesn't work. I'm not going to say it's broken. It's way too grindy. Okay, it's completely repetitious. The only problem I ever had with the gameplay before this one from Yakuza 0 to Judgment is that it would be repetitious. Otherwise, I thought it was a solid gameplay element. Just the beat 'em up. It just needed improvement. The JRPG gameplay is terrible. Terrible for a Yakuza game. And I honestly, I just kept getting into these parts where I would feel so superior and leveled up. and then this random guy that you met in the story that's gonna, continue the storyline says, "Oh yeah, the main bosses are in this building. All right, let's go." Oh, whoa. You gotta get dressed up. Go spend another 10 hours trying to fight people off and buy the equipment. And here's the problem with that. I say 10 hours because, yeah, you'll get a good amount of money every time that you beat a gang or whatever. But the problem is that sometimes the difficulty is so janked up. One gang will be incredibly easy to beat, but then right behind them, you'll beat up businessmen who will inevitably kick your ass in the end of the fight. And then when you lose a battle in the street, you lose at least half of your income. So are you understanding? You getting the gist of how the economy is broken in this game? It doesn't mesh with the story, which the story is basically like a run-through of a Yakuza story, but then they add and implement all these Japanese RPG elements into it. It just does not work at all. I like the protagonist. I thought the story was intriguing. There were a lot of parts that were very meandering, and it's mainly because the secondary characters weren't really good. I mean, Ichiban, Kagase or whatever his last name was, he was actually a really good protagonist. If I were to compare him to Kazuma Kiryu, he's almost as good. Kazuma just stole my heart, though. Just going through 0 to 6. But Ichiban, he's a pretty good protagonist. He had a really good storyline. But the secondary characters, the writing, the direction, the gameplay, it was all squandered. And normally I give the average Yakuza game between a 7 to an 8. I gotta give Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon a 5 out of 10. They tried to do different, but in the process, in my personal opinion, Yakuza Like a Dragon is way too inferior. Now, I gave Yakuza 3 a 6 out of 10 because the story was really boring and the characters were really boring, but at least it was still story driven. At least you were able to focus on the story and or other things. You had the choice. In Yakuza 7, you don't have the choice. It's a game made to complete everything, and I'm sorry, but you can't do that. Games should mandatorily have difficulty settings and side quests together. And the reason being, my number one philosophy on playing and reviewing games has always been this: play it on the very easiest difficulty. Get a good gist, a good exposition on the main story, okay? The direction, the writing, the gameplay itself for the most part, the acting. And then replay it on the hardest difficulty. That way, you're still not forced to, but it's better to do everything to be able to go through the story. Not strip away the difficulty setting to where you're forced to do everything, where the first 6 hours of Yakuza 7, it's easy as hell to play through, but then, boom, everybody's kicking your ass. And you can't do anything because every time you lose, your income is half depleted. It doesn't work and it doesn't make sense to put into a Yakuza game. So, like I said, Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon is a 5 out of 10. Thank you.